They might be self-aware.
Today on They Might Be Self-Aware, ChatGPT gets 8 different personalities because apparently one wasn't sycophantic enough for you people. Robots taking over Amazon warehouses, which is hilarious because they rejected my application last month for, and I quote, insufficient spatial awareness. And there's this whole debate, but sure, let's all debate whether AI achieved general intelligence when it can't even pick up a coffee mug. Which I guess means I still beat computers at one task. That is until Apple ships that iPad with a hand. The guy at Pump 3 keeps staring at me. Enjoy the show.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.
Bloodshot dispatches from the AI hustle right here on They Might Be Self-Aware. I am Hunter Powers, joined by my esteemed co-host,
Daniel Bishop. I'm esteemed this time. I love it.
Yeah. Bloodshot.
What makes me esteemed?
I would need to consult with my Grok advisors. If I could just go hop in my Tesla for like 5 minutes. Yeah, hey, 5 minutes. Really, let me be right back.
Daniel started off desperately needing to be gassed up. We've got to give him something. He needs a win.
Maybe, I don't know, have you tried 5.1 yet? I hear you can tweak it. OpenAI 5.1?
Yeah,
GPT-5.1?
I have. I've only played with like 2 of the personalities. There's like 8 of them now. So for those of you who aren't in the know, on the razor's edge of AI, GPT-5 is in the ancient past now. We're all the way up to 5.1. And there was a fun little press release where they're like, look, we heard from you. Everyone's kind of complaining that it's sort of dry. So not only does it have more personality, it's got 8 of them. There's a whole bunch of different personalities that you can choose from like concise to, I think, quirky is the name of one of them. A few different ways to interact with AI. And honestly, I really, really like it.
Does it have a flirty mode?
I didn't see anything about flirty, but I really like having some flexibility in how you're going to talk to these things because different people in different circumstances prefer different modes of communication. You and I do it. We talk slightly differently whenever we're on this podcast from in real life. If you're speaking to a business associate versus an old high school friend, you speak differently. Why wouldn't you want to have a different kind of modality under which you're speaking to your AI?
Well, for the record, I speak exactly the same. Which now I'm questioning.
No matter what.
But yeah. So I remember when GPT-5 first came out, there was this outcry about 4.0, I guess, going away because 4.0 was everyone's best friend. And then they had to bring back 4.0 so that the sycophants like myself could still, have those special conversations. Is this
hear anything about like a funeral being given for it? And I remember we talked about a funeral for like an old Claude model, but people just got upset that 4.0 was going away.
But is this kind of the response to what they felt was missing from 5 that was in 4? Or do you see this as something completely different?
No, I see it as exactly that. There's something about the architecture. Maybe it's the smarts. Maybe it's about cost effectiveness. It's probably some combination of both, where they want to have 4.0 go the way of the dinosaur. And they also want people to be happy using their product. And so give it a little extra personality. I think that's exactly what they're doing here, is trying to move forward, not having to keep the lights on an old model, but still give the people what they want.
Yeah, I saw some discussion around whether they would now finally turn off 4.0, with, of course, some people arguing that no, there's no reason to. But others, like the counterpoint is, 4.0, even the information that it was trained on now is quite dated. It hasn't been updated in,
since 2023, I think.
Yeah, it's years. It's years of outdated information in it. And 5.0 is a far more proficient model, although I don't know about you. I sometimes find 5 to be significantly slower than 4 was.
Absolutely. 5 is, well, I think by default it has a thinking mode on, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it has its own sort of variable. It'll think as much as it thinks it needs to think on.
Well, there's like a router. There's like an auto that'll select, or you can manually point it to one if you're.
But I think by default, it's going to use that router, which means some of the time it's going to give it a good thought before it comes back to you. I don't mind that. And so I feel like when it comes to people interacting with large language models, there's now almost like this divide. There's two sets. There's people who say like, hey, large language model, give me an answer to this thing. I want this now. And it is supposed to, in one response, give you the thing that you're interested in. This is like how people interact with their home devices. Hey, smart home device, what's the weather going to be like today? That doesn't need to be a back and forth, right? People don't want that to be a back and forth. It's one response back to you. Then there's what I've found tremendous value out of when it comes to coding, isn't going down that route. It's instead, here's everything that I've got so far. Don't answer the problem. I specifically will say, like, I don't want you to start coding yet. I want you to ask me questions and look around and learn and then give me a plan. And, lots of these tools have a planning mode, but I'm really being very explicit about it. Let's work through this first. I don't want you to just do. Let's think first. And it's not like thinking where it just wastes a bunch of tokens, quote unquote, thinking about it. I really enjoy watching these things grab a bunch of pieces of context and then ask me 5 to 10 questions. Innumerably, immeasurably, is somethingly better results come out of that. So, sometimes you have to wait.
So 5.1's out, but its key feature is I guess, more conversational. It's not about being smarter. It's not about I get a better answer. It's just that
Didn't really see
the answer is potentially smoother in a conversation. I don't really care.
I think you do. You're one of the people that has, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, on this own podcast, been saying, I really wanted to be sycophantic toward me. Okay, sycophancy or otherwise, having different personalities that you can interact with is something that people have been doing since, I'd say, time immemorial, but it's been a few years at the most. Really, what these different personalities are don't seem to be actual different fine-tunes of the model. It seems to probably be part of the system prompt where just before you chat with it, hey, you're this kind of bot and here's your personality, make sure to respond like that. Maybe it is fine-tuned, I don't know, it probably isn't. But there are lots of other people that have fine-tuned their own models on specific kinds of text to act or talk or respond or whatever in certain ways. The Claude folks do it. Everybody does this whenever they come up with a model, which is to say, here are a bunch of examples of how I want you to respond. Learn how to do that. Why wouldn't you want to have different ways of speaking to it if you're being more social versus researchy versus coding versus flirty?
Mm-hmm. All right, you sold me on flirty. I guess the reason why maybe this isn't the thing to focus on, to spend more GPU cycles on making it, I don't know, more smooth to talk to, is apparently OpenAI and maybe many other AI companies, their server bills are running through the roof. There's like OpenAI loosely asked the US government for, at the extreme, a bailout, at the least some guarantee of funding should they default on loans. Right. Which they've since sort of walked back, and as the government said, hell no, more or less.
Depending where you look, you might see news articles that say they're losing $15 million a day just on like the image generation side of things, let alone everything else. I don't think without actually having access to their books, we'll ever know really what it is, but it doesn't seem like they're a profitable company.
No, they're losing an insane amount of money. I don't think that's a debatable fact. And the thing that they're trying to do now, they're trying to spend, what is it, $2 trillion, I think, to go and build new data centers to run all of these models. And I guess they're trying to pitch it on the government angle.
Which still would be operating at a loss. Like that, to have all of that money to make all that stuff, you still have to replace the GPUs every few years. You're still not making a profit on it anyways. If they're trying to get the government involved, what I'm wondering is there a push for this to be a like strategic Homeland Security, government needs to get involved sort of path? Is there an angle of AI becomes a utility?
No, the angle is that AI is currently the biggest driving force behind the US economy and our largest potential, if not our only potential, for regaining our, world dominance, USA #1 million times above everyone else, because we do seem to legitimately have a lead in AI, and there absolutely is a narrative that AI is the future. So, hey, USA, you like being #1 USA? You're going to need to do some investments into it. And we do that all the time, right? Like the government optimizes its structure, its rules, its laws for the types of companies that can thrive in our country. The more money companies in our country makes, the better off our company is, and potentially the better our government is.
Well, not just OpenAI, but your Anthropics and your Metas and Microsoft, even a little bit. They've got some fairly capable models. All of these different players in the game in the US. You didn't mention Apple. Specifically. I didn't mention Apple.
Sorry.
All of these major players in the game are spending so much money on not just the training of the models, but the data centers and so on. We're into a percent of GDP along the lines of like Manhattan Project level of investment. That is a hell of a lot. So the economy, and certainly those behind the AI revolution, really are betting the farm on this is the future. We have to very, very, very heavily involve ourselves in this. But also, like, the Manhattan Project had an output which was the bomb, or if you look at like the amount of money, a similar, order of magnitude of like percent of US GDP for like the highway system, or the initial push to like electrify homes, like all these huge initiatives within the United States, also having all started from government side as opposed to the private side. There is an endpoint where, like, yes, you have to do maintenance on the highway system, but you make the highway system and then it is available to everyone. We already have large language models. Like, is there even a point where we can then say we don't have to forever be pouring this much money into it? Is there a point at which we pull the brakes, the AI bubble is allowed to pop, and then we say, okay, it's only $200 billion? Like, right? Because there are competitors in this space, isn't there always going to be a push forward? Is this just a percent of the GDP forever?
Well, I think to that end, it would be really interesting from a government perspective to understand what their end goal is. More is always a bad goal. What is the state, U.S. government, in an ideal world, where do you want us to be? What is the thing that you want the AI to be able to do tomorrow that it can't do today, that you think that we should optimize our entire economy around driving this force? And of course, I kind of love it, but there's this element where we are driving towards our own obsolescence, right? The thing that it's going to do in the future is every job that every American and everyone else around the world does every day to day. That seems to be the path that we are on, which doesn't seem to be ultimately good for the economy. So what is your utopian...
Good for the economy, just not the people in it. There'll still be output, right?
Yes, but if no one works anymore, then there's no one to pay for there already is no one to pay for the GPUs, okay? Already there's no one to pay for the GPUs. But at least we give 10 cents on the dollar for the GPUs. And it seems like the future, that the thing that we don't have today that we might have in the future is the fact that we can't pay anything for the GPUs. That's... What do they want?
Number go up?
More
money, more revenue, more profit from these things. But we're not anywhere close to profit for what appears to be most of these players outside the Chinese financial firms that have a whole bunch of spare GPUs and like, we'll train some stuff and release it and erode the US dominance just by giving it away for free. I don't know. It's The end game does seem to be artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence. Microsoft now has their own superintelligence sort of team, and they say we're going to focus on the science side of things and biology and chemistry and what have you. Good, great. I think that's fantastic. Hopefully there's a lot of cancer drugs or whatever that come out of it. But if we do get to the point where we have artificial general intelligence and everybody's job just disappears into the wind, then what? We've talked about it before. I think it has to be universal basic income. Otherwise, you have 11 people who make 100% of the money, and then everyone else tears them to shreds and starts a new world order. I don't know. I mean, people can only go for so long without.
Everyone has to move to Montana.
That's true. Montana's looking pretty nice these days. Governor says you're allowed to use AI for sure.
Yeah,
it's law now.
The right to compute.
I love that.
Is it an inalienable right?
Needed, but it's nice for someone to sort of on the legal side say this is important enough to make sure, yes, you're allowed to do it.
I know there are circumstances where when people get in trouble in the legal system around computer crimes that they get banned from technology for periods of time.
Sure. And it feels like the ancient past at this point, but the government had said that you have to basically report if you're using over a certain amount of compute in the training of AI models. That was like 2-ish years ago, and I haven't heard bupkis about that ever since. I'm wondering if the Montana rule of like you're allowed to operate these tools, I don't know if that sort of interacts with the you can train your own. It seems like sort of a nice gesture though, right? Montana saying, if you want to have some AI, we'll never take it away from you.
They also included in this SB 212, the Montana Right to Compute Act, some AI safety notes around it has to, any AI run critical infrastructure must have a manual override. There must be some way to turn it off.
I think that's because someone saw enough movies where the AI is taking over and then the protagonist has to get to the big power switch and dramatically turns it off right at the last second.
Don't they always, like, you can always cut the power.
Just turn it off. Also, so I guess I'm glad that they are thinking along these lines. However, as much as I'm a big fan of AI stuff in general, AI run critical infrastructure still feels kind of icky to me. I don't feel great about, like, let's just put the power plants and, electrical grid, like, we don't need people doing that. Well, they're just monitoring a dashboard all day, right?
Not generative AI. I think that's the generative AI should not be running our critical infrastructure. But
I do not want Meta's Llama 3.1 model being in charge of whether or not I get gas, turned off to my house.
But switching telephone networks, quote unquote AI. Yeah, absolutely. But just not generative AI.
Yeah, and right. Whenever we talk about AI on this podcast, I think we, as well as probably a lot of people these days, default to thinking generative AI, a large language model or some vision type models out there where it can make a picture or make you some text, as opposed to traditional machine learning, which is just, it's all really just a bunch of matrix multiplication when you think about it. But traditional ML is fitting points to a curve, or here's some 300-dimensional space. What's the closest point between A and B?
It's very similar to statistics.
It really is just some very
computational statistics. That is a defendable, although you can argue against it, but a defendable definition of computational statistics.
Stirring the cauldron of math until the right number comes out, which again also is still what generative AI does, but there has to be some, I've got to give it some thought. Maybe I'll ask Claude, of like, where can we easily draw the line of like, other than saying generative versus not AI? What is really the difference architecturally? Can't be the attention mechanism. I don't know. We'll ask Claude. Maybe I'll come back next episode and say, here's the difference between generative and non-generative AI.
We're getting towards the end of the year. It's counting down. We're getting the final days of 2025. I wanted to do
Santa's able to kind of go through his list a lot faster these days. Have summaries made up from all the children lists or whatever.
Yeah. An AGI ASI check-in. First off, on the AGI, the general intelligence, I'm not sure exactly where you currently stand. I feel like you've suggested that maybe we've already achieved it, that the AI is already better at most things than a human. First, let me just check in. Have we achieved AGI in 2025 from your perspective? Not the consensus, but just you personally.
I think, I always talk about things in terms of X% of people, Y% of tasks, Z% of the time. And those numbers all keep going up. I don't know where exactly AGI is because that G really holds a lot of weight there. General. Can AI do everything that anybody could do? There's still a lot of clicking around on a computer, build a PowerPoint, work with a Excel doc where we're seeing more of these agents that can look at a screen and move around and do things. I don't think that we're quite there yet. Certainly on the robotics front, you don't see people yet having been replaced by humanoid robots doing warehousing type work or driving all of the cars or what have you. So obviously, I don't think we're actually at AGI, but in terms of the kinds of tasks that a large language model can do, I would say yes. So for that certain percentage of the X and Y and Z, they're a lot better at coding every programming language compared to the average person who knows no programming languages, or translating text from one language to another, let alone bunches of languages. Most people can't translate from one language to 30, 100, however many others. In so many respects, these are wildly more capable than people are. But I think as we think about AGI, it's hard not to think of it in terms of what are the economic drivers. Is it smarter than people? Yes. Is it more capable in the same ways that people do things? No.
So from your perspective, computer tasks, we have achieved AGI for computer tasks.
Computer tasks that don't involve you looking at a screen and navigating a website. If it's something that could be spit out in a text form to do a thing, I'd say yes.
There were text-based adventures in the very early age of video games. So text-based tasks, that area, AGI achieved, mission accomplished.
Totally.
Once you start introducing the GUI, not quite.
No, but I remember early this year, we talked about this being the year of the agent. That proved to be pretty true. Agents are everywhere. Everybody's got agents. Agents that do agent stuff. What's 2026 going to bring? Those agents being better than people? I don't know. Maybe. We'll talk about that next year. But how about you, Hunter? You asked me the question. It's only fair to lob it back to you. Did we do it? Was this the year that we got AGI?
Well, one note about robots taking people's jobs. I actually think that there are many examples of robots taking people's jobs in the factory setting. I think that is happening. You can see the footage of Amazon warehouses where there are a tremendous amount of robots working. There are humans working as well. I was in the grocery industry, in the tech side of the grocery industry for a while, and there are fully automated grocery warehouses. And I worked on that a little bit. But again, many people have lost their jobs to robots in the warehouse, sector, we'll call that. So, and it's increasing. And there's also a buzz going on right now that next year is going to be the year of the robot. We talked about Neo on a recent episode, that in theory that launching into homes. And if that does happen, which seems like a very big if, but if that does happen, next year being a landmark year for robots does seem plausible. Strong rumors that Apple will also introduce a robot, nothing like the Neo, but their first robot, which I still don't understand, is in theory an iPad with a hand. I don't really get it. I don't get it.
I don't see Apple successfully getting into the robotic. It's just so far afield from what they do. I don't know.
They're a little lost. But all right, back to your question.
Steve Jobs would be spinning in his grave, right? If someone showed up iPad with a hand.
That's literally and by the way, these are very reputable rumors that it kind of sits in the middle of your table and it has a hand and an iPad screen.
We call it the non-lazy Susan.
I don't get it. other than like an interesting science project.
Like,
But no, we have not achieved AGI. We're very far from ASI. And as far as will we achieve it next year, I think I think it's possible, but it's not, it would require a miracle. Like it's incredibly low probability that we are a year away from achieving this. And I think at the beginning of this year,
like the frontier's being pushed forward, but it sounds like you expect that there'd have to be a seismic shift, a new neural network architecture that comes out that is fundamentally different from the approach that we can't just do more compute about it. Is that where you're going with this?
I think that is part of it, but it's there are too many interfaces, right? We can't boil everything down to just text. I type text in, text comes back out, which is such a rudimentary mode of interaction. And
right. Well, we need them to be better at interacting with computer screens.
That's the general. That's the biggest gap in the general, and then outside of the computer.
Well, right. So I've talked a couple of times on this podcast of I want a robot arm. Maybe it's the Apple one, iPad. That's given a lab, like a science lab, like a chemistry lab, and you give it, here's all of your different ingredients. And sure, maybe you came up with what you think is a cure for cancer. Prove it. And like it has to do it. That level of sophistication is clearly not where we're at now, but if a LLM hooked up to a robot arm or whatever is given 6 months and then comes up with like, you know, at least up to the rodent level potential vaccine for cancer, that it would be insane, right? Like that's way beyond where we currently are.
Yeah. I'll put it, we're at the end of this show, but I'll put it this way. I think that the moment AI can write a song that's just like the number one song on the charts, we will have achieved it. That's never going to happen. And I thank everyone for tuning in today, right here on They Might Be Self-Aware. Subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe button. What's the worst that could happen? What's your doomsday scenario? Leave it in the comments if you subscribe to this show. Maybe you'll find something interesting. Maybe you'll be entertained. Maybe we're all just on this happy, sad path to our own obsolescence. I don't know. Maybe we need to start putting hands on more things. Maybe that's the secret. Next year, I'm long hands. I'm short. What am I short?
Everyone, go ahead and get in the comments and tell us what you'd put a hand on.
We're available pretty much everywhere you would expect us to be available. Obviously, you've already found us somewhere, so how's that platform working out for you? But if you wanted a different platform, you're like, I really want to stretch my wings here. Well, you can watch us. If you want the video version, YouTube's the place to be. Podcasts, I don't know, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast directory. There is a They Might Be Self-Aware now on twice a week. We thank you.
It's true.
We thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And until next time, when we will be back for another episode of
They might be self-aware.